Good afternoon, everyone. Broadcasting from the center of the universe here in Toronto, Ontario, in the sunny confines of the border I'm in right now. My name is Craig O'Neill. I'm with TechBlocks. I am the Director of Sales, and I have the privilege of hosting today's inaugural Future of Work panel discussion. We're very excited to discuss today's topic in greater detail with our three esteemed panelists that I'm really excited to get their perspectives and their really their intricate details of what they foresee that's going to happen in a post-COVID world, or if you want to frame it as 2021 and beyond. But without further ado, I wanted to introduce our three panelists today. First and foremost, Rodney Hobbs. He's the former Chief of Employee Experience Transformation at VMware. We also have Sveta Malpan. She is the co-founder and managing partner of Yenza 3. And lastly, we have Prashant Kumar. He is the CEO and founder of TechBlocks and FlexOne. The future of work, it's a huge topic. I think in the last 9 months since this pandemic has started, it means different things to different people. And I think when we talk about several industries being affected and this whole idea of remote work, I think a lot of individuals, not just myself, are looking for a perspective and a greater understanding of what does the future of work mean. We talk about topics like the gig economy, how jobs will change, how functions of jobs will change in multiple industries, and trying to get a grasp of how do particular stakeholders in organizations manage this big ball of wax. What does it mean in terms of cultural impacts, among other things, within an organization? How do organizations best manage, plan, and strategize for managing this new idea of the future of work? And I think our three panelists are going to provide distinct perspectives on what that means, and I'm really excited to hear what they have to say. So first and foremost, I'll start with Prashant, really high level Prashant. What does the future of work mean in your minds as we look at the balance of 2020 and 2021? Curious to hear what you think what the future looks like.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much, Craig, for hosting this. The man behind this webinar, Martin, thank you again. My panelists, co-hosts, Shweta and Rodney, looking forward to this session. Thank you again. It's funny, we talk about future of work, and normally we would be doing this session like, in a boardroom, and somebody would be recording it. And today, look at this, like almost all these future of work sessions or any kind of panel discussions are now happening remotely. And first shout out for what future of work looks like. Rodney is right now logged in at the middle of the night from Australia. So if that is not future of work, I don't know what is. So thank you, Rodney, for doing this. Welcome again. So, I wanted to take just a quick second to say, okay, we all work in certain work spheres, environments, and verticals, and our vision and definition is shaped by our ecosystem. Since most of my professional life, I have worked in high tech, and have been working with businesses around their business transformation, more specific to technology, just providing an answer to the context to of technology-driven lens will be a disservice. So, taking some diverse point of view, we'll try to understand what is happening now in my answer, and then try to deduce what is shaping up, and then we can see how firm or permanent it is. So, before I share some of my observations, I will encourage people to visit, vForum and Future of Work in World Economic Forum. And there is an interesting white paper that has come, and I'll ask Martin to post it in our common forum link, which talks about what they think. It's an awesome white paper about what future of work will be in 2030. And there are 8 possible future of works that they have contemplated, and they have come up with the most common 3 factors that they feel are going to be, impacting the future of work in this regard. And the three factors are technological change, the learning evolution, and the talent mobility. And again, depending on how much each one of those factors are, there are 8 different scenarios, like mass movement or polarized world, or 6 skilled flows or agile adapters. And agile adapters, technological change is very high, learning evolution is very high, talent mobility is extremely high, empowered entrepreneurs, learning evolution is very fast, but technological change is steady and talent mobility is low. In a real world, actually, it will be a mix of this depending upon where you are, where your geography is, and so on and so forth. I highly encourage that. But coming back to my answer, here are my observations. The real challenge is not the change. A lot of us think that the fourth revolution, industrial revolution, and internet revolution, so on and so forth, and a lot of us call it the digital revolution, and our societies and our habitats are not designed to adjust to this sort of pace in a coordinated fashion, which is what is causing a lot of undesired effects, and many times we're not able to control it in the way we have done it in the past. The second thing, as I said, it is mostly fueled by technology. So if we talk about So if we talk about a lot of these changes, it's primarily between globalization and technology. And if we talk it being fueled by technology and the rapid pace of enhancement and application of these things in our daily life, whether we talk about science, technology, defense, retail, in our daily lives, basically it is that. So it's technology-driven automation, decision-making, disruption of the value chain with numerous use cases is the root cause of the change. And then there's a massive skill gap, and organizations are finding it really difficult to find the right skilled people to deal with the disruption. This is happening. And the convergence of industries and verticals is happening as we speak, given the rise of the new generation of companies who are destroying the paradigms and the rules, world order, and the rules that we are used to operating under, because we are not used to, or we were not, at least I didn't grow up with this new world order which is being disrupted, and we were not taught or trained in our lives to operate in this new world order. The world is divided between people, cultures, countries, groups, and interests who stand to benefit from this change, and are hell-bent on pushing it further. And then there are groups, people, and governments who cannot afford this pace of change and are trying to create a soft ramp to soften the blow. And we are seeing this around our homes, cafes, workplace, and policy discussions around the government. So now that we understand what is happening, let's try to understand what is it going to shape up and how permanent it is. So I'm just going to look, and I think my lens says next 3 to 5 years, because seeing beyond that for which the current pace of change would be foolish. So technology is a core driver, and we need to recognize and act on it and embrace it. Having technology-driven education, training, and cross-skilling, upskilling, and constant learning has become part of our, what I call future of work, which is happening today in our daily lives. So we have to get used to it. Degrees and diplomas will have lesser value and currency, while acquiring skills and your ability to learn, refresh, and adapt is here, it's already here, and it is going to stay, and it is only going to accelerate. Lots and lots of automation and software-driven work functions, including decision-making, is going to become part of that. The first thing, that's what I think. The second, the definition of work environments, contracts, policies itself is already changing. There's alternate workforces, main workforces. Let me give you an example of that. Gig economy. Gig economy has always been there. It's not like a new phenomenon, but it has never been mainstream. I believe now it is getting more and more mainstream. The pace is going to accelerate, and vast majority of people are going to have multiple jobs. And that is going to have upstream, downstream effects, right, from HR policies, the government policies, and how our social support structures are formed. And we have seen that vast majority during the COVID, like how our societies and cultures and policies are not well equipped to or prepared for dealing with something like that. So the way we measure work products, bill for it, pay for it will shift. For example, in our IT world, how we QA jobs, and we can go down to the QA departments, or even on the factory floors. These departments can be in a totally different part of the world, and it can be a confluence of human and technology, not just humans or not just technology. So it's highly likely that you will never meet vast majority of your colleagues in person in a workplace that is shaping up. Yet we will collaborate with them on a daily basis. The concept of work timing shifts completely evolve based on companies, industries, individuals, groups, and they will be much more fluid and free-flowing. And last, government policies will drastically change. Work laws, compensation laws, taxation laws. We are already seeing with Biden government coming, one of the biggest things on their agenda is to bring big technology under control. If you read, at least in our local papers where I am in Toronto, we see always how can we bring technologies under control. Unprecedented government coordination will be required between governments with virtual economic zones and blocks that will start getting created. So I think this is going to form the future of work and the digital environment around it. I don't know what other people think. Maybe Rodney and Shweta, you can chime in. What do you guys think?
Yeah. So my background is learning and development, and I will kind of contribute to this conversation from that perspective and lens. Having been in this space for almost 2 decades, I'm seeing that COVID has actually acted as a catalyst. So companies are no longer just thinking about closing the gap or trying to catch up. It has actually led organizations to catapult into the new world of how employees need to be taken care of. So when I look at future of work, I'm seeing it from 2 different perspectives. One is the employees or the workers' perspective and the employer's perspective. I mean, if we look at workers' perspective, I think it's all about flexibility. And when I say flexibility, I'm thinking about where I want to work, what I want to work on, when I want to work, how I want to work. And this doesn't seem like a big issue, but as soon as you zone into top talent or talent that is sought after, this seems like like an issue that needs to be addressed going forward. Because when we look at flexibility will mean different things to different people. Even if we look at 4 or 5 buckets of what, where, when, and how, the combination of all those 5 aspects will be very unique. Personalization is going to be key. That leads employers, in my opinion, in a tricky situation, so to speak, because so far the workforce models were pretty standard and static across the board. But now with this workers' desire for flexibility, it means that organizations or employers need more visibility into their talent. If they are embarking on this journey of building a fluid workforce, that means in order to personalize workforce policies, processes, new things that you implement from a skill development perspective or engagement perspective have to be highly personalized. That means data is going to become a really critical aspect. And when I say data, I'm looking at data that is actively available for organizations and stitching it together, but also passive data, which is already in the organizational ecosystem, but is in disjointed technology systems, so to speak. So bringing it all together and creating a flexible and personalized work environment for employees, especially if we want to retain our top talent, because there's going to be massive skill gap, not just within a team or an organization, but globally in the workforce, is going to become very, very important.
Thanks, guys. Well, look, firstly, good afternoon to everybody, whoever's out there in the great internet. And obviously, it is actually the morning here in Australia on a lovely summer's day, or starting to be. So thank you very much for the opportunity to participate and share some views. So I'm going to try and be succinct, which is kind of what I'm known for, is being a little bit direct. So the way I'm going to skin this, in the sense of trying to answer the question, what do I think the future of work is? I kind of, to take a little bit of a sarcastic view, I see the future as being very bright, and a lot of people in lots of different ways contributes to the kind of glossiness of that view of the future of work. And there's a lot of things that I would like to think that we should be very optimistic about, in the sense of what work should be. And all of the kinds of things that the other panelists have kind of mentioned are just a long array of different variables that are being considered from all different perspectives. But I suppose I like to be seen as a little bit more of a realist. And I think, to me, if I try to distill this down, I think there's a fundamental disconnect that has happened and is happening, and I see still happening. And that disconnect is that while all of these exciting things are happening, and most of us, and I talk about anyone in the world that has a mobile phone, our consumer experiences are far more advanced, far more integrated in an ecosystem of things that we do in a digital context than essentially what we call the enterprise or when I go to work. Now, obviously, a lot of people then might get defensive because that's the old mechanism to be able to argue that no, their company is most advanced, most innovative, most this, most that, most something else. And that's the issue. The issue is that we're still working in a construct that was designed about 130 years ago. So we can thank Taylorism and a guy called Owen, because Owen gave us the blessing of a 40-hour week, which of course none of us work unless we punch a card. And we've got the other guy, Taylor, who decided that, he wanted to spend his time working out how much was the ideal load in a shovel. So what we can see is we still work in a management construct that is failing everyone. But the trick when you're in the system is to defend the system, because that's the status quo. So I'm a technologist, and there's this amazing array of technology that I could bedazzle you with and tell you that we should all be doing: fluid mobility, AI, decision systems, and all of these amazing things that's going to make my life better. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case, because the management, which is that broad term, and that can mean many things, they manage life through a P&L, largely speaking. So they don't have the money, they don't have the inclination, they don't have the imagination most of the time that they're going to actually lead. So what we've got to do is get rid of the management and actually find some new leaders that actually understand what leadership means, because that is going to be the catalyst of change. So unfortunately, when COVID hit, I thought, my goodness, here it is. Here is the accelerant. Here is the tin of petrol that at last is going to ignite people to get off, as we say in Australia, your arse. But unfortunately, no, that's not what happened. The only accelerant was to go buy notebooks, toilet paper, desks, and chairs, and somewhat squat yourself in some corner like I am, like a new hobbit, to live in a dark corner of my house and introduce the new verb of being able to Zoom, which is a bit silly because Zoom actually is not the largest platform that anybody's using. But I've not yet seen anybody in any media channels say that we suddenly need to team, because Microsoft Teams is the winner out of all of this, because every organization, from the CEO who picked the phone up and yelled at someone, who picked the phone up and yelled at IT then suddenly said, well, you've been sitting on all these business cases to allow us to roll out all these collaborative tools. So overnight, everybody got a bevy of collaborative tools. Unfortunately, two things didn't change: you and the work that you do. The only thing that changed is that we do it down a little webcam now. So instead of walking down the hallway with your coffee and sitting in a meeting room for 8 hours, you now sit on a webcam for 8 hours. That is not the future of work. So the last thing I would say is, the thing we've got to understand about the future of work is change. And change means real change, not people talking about change, because change from a human being perspective is a really funny thing, because I love change, but when I say that, I'm looking at everyone else. So I don't like change for me. I just agree that everyone else should change. And my wife agrees with that statement as well, because I believe if everybody agrees with me, i.e. change their behavior to agree with me, the world's going to be a better place. And I think most people see that as the fundamental of change. So we've spent a lot of money buying toys. Everybody now sits down an internet connection of varying degrees. And what's happened is work hasn't changed. Meetings largely haven't changed. The work that is going on hasn't changed. Probably the biggest thing that's happened in the last 8 to 9 months, depending on where you sit, is that you have less people in your workforce, because that's what your management did. They sacked people. There were nice ways and there were more brutal ways, because their business isn't built to survive an adaptive world. And we now live in an adaptive world that is continued to be disrupted. That's the future of work.
And Rodney, this is very interesting. I love what you said. In IT world, what I would like to say is future of work was always there. If you look at your LinkedIn feed, before COVID, like you had scattered mentions of it, and then COVID hit, and all you see was future of work, future. And their definition is exactly, I understand what you were trying to say, because that's what it meant for them, when it is meant to be something completely else, more permanent, and changes is something that we embrace as a way of life, and not just as something transient over just a small period of time. Now, I call COVID as a DR test for failed backup recovery, and in IT we have put all these things for enterprise, and everything is supposed to work till that building's lights go off, and none of the DR strategy ever worked. So how future of work? Well, we are all ready for future of work, and everything is great. We have everything set up. You can go on internet and do all this. And then suddenly COVID happened, and then the DR strategy kicked into place, and shit, we are not ready.
Well, how many people had that moment instantaneously when everybody suddenly switched and started doing all the fundamental things, which was accessing the business from outside of the business? So everybody's internet died, everybody's gateways died, everybody's security stuff got in the way. So all of the things that were mildly irritating for probably a smaller audience became irritating for a much larger audience very quickly.
But the best part, and I want to get Shweta in this as well, and from the education perspective, which is a very regulated, and governments look at it, at least in Canada. But look at it from our perspective, right? Suddenly, all these architectural groups, at least in enterprises, who get paid all the day long to just say all these policies you have to follow, fell out of place overnight. Suddenly, all those policies which you could not live by were removed, and security still didn't get. So how slow our systems and enterprises were suddenly removed, and suddenly people started collaborating more. Again, yes, we still are not where we need to be, and you're right, we're just starting to begin to work from home and just doing certain things that Rodney we talked about. But suddenly overnight, how come a lot of those changes which were not supposed to happen overnight?
Let's just understand what happened when COVID hit. And let's just understand a very simple fundamental, and then I'll let Shweta come into the.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree with you, Rodney. I think from a learning and development perspective or skill development perspective, it's the same story. For a number of years, L&D people have been kind of hitting their head against a brick wall, trying to say, we need to have a digital infrastructure. We need to bring learning in the flow of work. We need to not isolate learning from work. Learning needs to happen while work is happening. But getting the leadership buy-in towards letting go of events and looking at alternate ways of supporting an employee's performance in work environment was quite a bit of a challenge. But then COVID happened, and organizations that had the technology foundation could pivot to the new world and support their employees' performance digitally by giving them training, by giving them coaching, mentoring. Everything can be now supported digitally. Yes, the human-to-human interaction is missing, but at least, we are able to now test the ground of what that digital human performance support ecosystem looks like, rather than just trying to push something that the organization wasn't ready for. So I agree. There's the stage that we are in. We've been thrown in like the deep end of the swimming pool, and we need to learn how to swim. There will be teething issues and problems, but I see that from a L&D perspective, it's going to be very hard to go back to the old world where you still have like physical spaces where you pull people off the work and bring them into a training session so that they can acquire skills at a fast-paced pace. In my opinion, it's going to be very hard to go back to this world. And at the same time, there's so much information overload in our ecosystem right now. And at the same time, the rate at which information is decaying is so fast that it's those old ways of, taking care of human performance development. And I call it performance support and development, because the moment you use the word training, you think about training happening outside the work context. And that's not the reality of an employee today. Training work coaching, mentoring, everything is happening fluidly while you're in your work environment. And I think that is going to stay, and we will see more and more technology that supports that kind of human performance support in the digital environment that we will have most of our workforce live in.
You know, one of the things very interesting you brought up, and I would like to hear, and that leads us to the next segment of discussion as well, and what Rodney said and what Shweta you said, is that, you know, we were born, and this is one of the things I referenced in my first, first part of the conversation, is how we were born and raised to think. And I think, Rodney, you meant to say the same thing with our corporate cultures and how it is top to bottom, and those two guys you referenced. We were referenced like, we have to study, we have to get these degrees and the diplomas, and then you have to get the computer this and that, and you have to get this certification and that. And then you spend time learning, and the organization's training you. So there was like this huge gap between guys who could really work, and these were, at least in my sector, these community colleges guys, oh my God, these guys can get shit done because they know Java or a particular framework or JavaScript. And then this is like amazingly bright, smart guys who work hard, their fundamentals are strong, but they don't know JavaScript coding. They might not know VMware. They're not skilled on it. And then they go on a training and so on. So the convergence in today's world, they're doing this, and the rate of change is so fast that even if you are training and you came this month and you have new products, you need to learn 3 new things. Whether in our context, in our world, it doesn't matter which domain you are in, you might have to learn these 3 things. In some cases, these labs or these work training places outside work are becoming less and less relevant because they do not have the context, and they do not provide the real world scenarios, and they actually do not prepare you for very well for those to perform in those real world scenarios. So given those things, that just being one of the examples, let me ask you this. Do you think there is some kind of huge impact that has specific to IT stakeholders that they have been impacted, and what are they experiencing any kind of organizational roadblocks? What are you seeing in terms of what the appetite is for digital transformation? And are roles evolving, responsibilities evolving, are these organizational structures changing? What do you see in yours? I can share my view towards the end. I think Rodney, Shweta, whoever wants to go first.
I might jump in. So, look, there's quite a few things in there to unpack. So I agree. I think the education system in general, and I don't see that changing in too many parts of the world, but the education system that I was brought up in, and one is still that in play, which is you go to school, work hard, go get a degree, go get a career, and your career is largely that. And we've been talking about the gig economy for a long time, but my statement on education is it's failing. Education has become essentially a business in a business model that isn't going to work. So I think it's got to fundamentally change to be able to effectively adapt rather than just decide that international students or online learning is the revenue stream that it's got to chase as the kind of blended learning and physical argument continues to resonate. I think obviously if you're a doctor, a brain surgeon and serious things, there are certainly, you still need qualifications, and there's still a pathway that is important. But I think if you think of a lot of other areas in the world, the great magnitude of books on what we need to be doing and learning is all about adaptive learning, right? It's going to be, you're going to have certain skills, you're going to get rid of some of those skills, you're going to pick up new skills, you're going to get rid of those and pick up new skills as you continue to loop or evolve through the types of tasks or activities that you do that you call work. So I think for me, I'm always curious, I'm always keen to be learning. So I think I'm better positioned because just naturally it's what I've done. I think for other people, it's going to be something that we need to arm our future generations with the ability to, as we've been saying for a long time, critical thinking, innovation, creativity, empathy, interactions. These are all the important things that make us human. All of the other stuff is going to be done by AI, bots, and God knows what, as AWS and Microsoft dominate the world as being the technology that just becomes this fabric that's woven into our lives, which largely I can say Apple does that now. But I mean, in the sense of specifically IT, and then I'll let Sveta have some comments. Look, I agree with a comment that Sveta made. A lot of organizations were better positioned because of their digital posture. And so they were able to respond, react better to allow work to continue. My argument is work just didn't change. So while work, for me has never been about somewhere I go, it's something I do. When organizations had to suddenly go to a remote workforce, which I hate that word, and I wrote an article about that remote is the wrong word. It doesn't matter where you are, but your team lead and your management structure still largely work in a paradigm where they want to see you, because really the nub of all of this is they don't trust you. So they need to see you to believe that you do work. And that's an old adage and an old mental construct, because our organizations aren't actually truly designed to manage outcomes. They manage inputs and outputs, not outcomes. So if it takes me 4 hours to do something or 44 hours, why should the organization care? So is IT impacted? I think IT, and we've been saying this for as long as I've been trotting around as a technologist, I think IT is going to fall into two camps. They're either going to be seen as helping the organization lead this change and respond because they are the most digitally dexterity armed in the company, if that's such a thing, or they're just going to become a cost that gets managed out the door, which is what a lot of IT is what has happened to you. You're going to become the janitor, and the janitor does not have a bright future. Sorry to be the one to give you some bad news, but if you haven't realized that that's the bad news in IT, then I suggest you've got some bigger problems. You need to wake up. So I think you either need to get off your ass and lead and get engaged with the business, because technology will change and no one really cares. What people care about is what the business needs to do, and bringing everybody on that journey that is, and I'm going to say the nasty words, fit to come on that journey. Because there is a lot of people in the workforce right now, and you might be sitting there listening to this webinar, you don't have a future because you need to change your job. So just sitting there in the middle of the organization doing things is not good enough anymore. We need people that are engaged, that are going to be driven. Sveta?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a slightly different thought process around education in general, because I completely agree that our academic education system is like 100-plus-year-old system, and it's same old, and it's not building the future workforce so that people can complete a degree or get certification and apply those skills in real world. But I think leaning on academic systems to pivot and change is going to take a long time. And the onus for education, I think, rests and resides with the corporations in the world. And they have a heavy task ahead of them, because the nature of a job is fundamentally changing. If we look at gig economy, if we look at contingent workforce, if we look at project-based work and hierarchy disappearing, that means the way HR people are understanding their employee base is going to be fundamentally different. That means it's going to be heavy lifting that has to be done in HR to dismantle the jobs the way we know it today, and dismantle them in terms of what are the tasks, activities that are required to perform a job. Does those tasks and activities need to be done by a single person, or can multiple people come and attack different aspects of the job? Which means they will need visibility into who has what skills to perform what parts of the job, the holistic job. So that's why I say, from an HR's perspective, visibility is going to be key. And visibility, not just in terms of who has what skills, but who desires to grow in what skill areas, so that they can provide interventions appropriately, and who wants to consume those interventions, what, where, and when, and how. So I think if we look at data from an enabler perspective, I think it's going to change the game in how HR looks after its employees. And that's why you see there's a huge momentum and noise around people analytics, looking at not just what people are telling HR about, this is what I aspire to do, or HR looking at performance management as a static piece. It's all going to come together, and that has a huge IT impact. And I say that because right now the whole IT technology ecosystem is disintegrated, and it doesn't give the right visibility to decision makers so that they can come up with the appropriate solution. And that's where I think number one thing that if I was sitting in IT, I would be looking at is how do I bring it all together? How do I integrate my systems to enable what the business is looking for in terms of decision making?
I think, Sveta, you touch on a good point. I don't see there's a bright future for HR either, because HR has largely failed. Yes. And for most people, and you can look at the data, you can see it anywhere, go Google it. HR is not trusted by the organization, so they are not going to lead us anywhere. You know, they are basically the people that hire and fire, and they don't do a good job on either end of the life cycle. Mm-hmm. So I don't really see, because this all goes back to the 80s or the 90s or whenever I came in, because we all probably started our career in something, or I did in IT, in this idea called a shared service. And the idea of a shared service was because someone went, well, we shouldn't really have 5 legal departments, 5 HRs, 5 this, 5 something else. You know, we need to go a little bit more Noah's Ark with an aggressive cutting strategy. So we need to have one camel and that's it. So we all herded ourselves into this function, and this function largely, and for some organizations, it's still there. All of these shared services sit under the CFO typically, and the CFO cares about one thing. They're lovely people, CFOs, but they're very short conversations, and they normally have a $ in front of them. So that's not the guy who's going to hug you and go, I absolutely agree, because he doesn't own that outcome. And that's partly the problem with the shared service model. People, culture, performance, the future of work. Who's the general manager of that again? That's right, no one. So there's no one sitting there at the boardroom going, well, hold on, guys, I'm the guy that's looking at this holistically, and here's the data, because we keep talking about the data. There's not a problem with the data. We've had more data than we can poke a stick at. The problem is we then want insights, and some people have lots of insights. The problem is they don't do anything with the insights, because as soon as you've got the insight, here it comes, the greatest corporate question there's ever been. Who's paying? Whose code am I using for that? And that's what happened with COVID. Everyone spent the capital buying all the notebooks. Everybody went off, and there's some very smart, intelligent people on this planet, and they've all come up with all the right things that need to happen. They went and tap danced onto the door of someone, their manager, and said, we'd like to do this because this is really going to help. And they went, yeah, sorry, no budget. The budget's been spent. The budget's been slashed. That's the conversation that has to change. And then the education system, we've got to stop beating children up, because children turn up to the education system enthusiastic and curious and creative and innovative and amazing. And then we spend 13 odd years beating the shit out of them to make them just dumb. Yeah. And we do that. I'm a product of the English education system, which when Rodney turned up, they said, well, do we think Rodney's smart? It's a little bit like Hogwarts. You know, the sorting hat came on and went, are you smart? You go into Slytherin. And if you're an idiot, you can go to Hufflepuff. And that's it. And then the next 13 years, you just got to kind of work it out.
Yeah. Funny. So I have a very converged view. I agree with so many things you said. So I have a bit of mostly optimist, but a lot cynicist as well. And I have a 15-year-old. And you know what I did, Rodney? And this is so funny. This happened just last week. I advised him to take some courses, and I didn't educate myself about how, because I studied in India and education system there, did my university engineering and all that. And I came here and I was watching my Rafa game, and he came and said, Dad, I want to do this grade 10. And I said, okay, you know what do you want to do? He's like, Dad, I haven't figured it out. I'm like, okay, what are your interests in? Dad, I really love that you're an entrepreneur and I love technology, but I also love business. So I said, okay, let's choose a business course, accounting. Let's choose a technology course, software, comp tech, and comp science. The descriptions were horrible, everything, and we made certain presumptions and we went into it. Smart kid, 3 weeks into the course, the guy is on the verge of failing. And this is a kid who gets 94%. And he is like nervous. Dad, this is my grade 11 U course, which will go into grade of grade. What happened? Oh, what are you studying in software engineering? They put me in an ID to teach C and program. Oh, why did they not teach you, this and that? And so I have my own pretty much large amount of criticism of how schools work, how education system works, and how do they do a great job at killing your enthusiasm and making you work till 3 a.m. to get certain grades, which have absolutely no meaning. But I also see certain optimism. I'll be optimistic side of education that, you know what, allowed him to combine in his project business of how would you take programming a project and apply it in real business scenario and prepare a leather sheet combined. Now that's a real world practical problem. They worked together on and they did a good job. Now, do I agree on how they get graded and how that impact their future? Definitely not. So there is some optimism. Now,
we've just got to relax. We've got to relax with our children, right? We've got to stop this idea from the Victorian times that we have to parrot things. We've got to understand what they're good at doing and let them figure out what their passion is, rather than trying to do Taylorism. There's one way to do something, and we push you all through the one pipe, and we expect certain things to happen at the end. That has failed. The gig economy is a great example of corporate everything, basically outsourcing various functions. So what is the best story of the gig economy? Graphic design. Why? Because no one wanted to keep graphic designers, so they got forced to be freelancers, which created the gig economy. You know, coding and contractors. That's essentially what gig economy was. It was entrepreneurship shoved into a cottage industry, not because anybody thought that was the best thing to do. It's because what corporates didn't want to pay for it.
No, but Rodney, this brings me to a very important point. And by the way, just before I bring up this new point to address this, one thing I really loved what you said is you brought up, it is so important because studies say the same thing. These are scientific studies. These are not just you and me, our regular observations. You know what Deloitte study recently said? What are the 5 most important skills that you need in the next 6 months? Collaboration, resilience, trade skills, creativity, adaptability, and within that, critical thinking and all that stuff. Which one of them is taught to you as a kid or in school and university? So I love that you said empathy and these things, because the rest of the things are going to change. That's permanently changing, and you will acquire those skills, and it's a constant life skill for you.
And we got to stop using this word resilience, because I think that's just, to be honest, sorry, I'm going to swear, but that's just bollocks. I mean, what do you resilience? I think we need to learn, and there's a certain bunch of things that are important to improve the ability for us to be adaptive. But we're human beings. We're adaptive out of the box. There is no instructions. We come into this world and we're adaptive. Now, whether you want to say we're resilient or not, I think what we've got to do is stop in some ways, and this is probably, I'm channeling my old father here with my English background. We've just got to kind of harden up a little bit, right? I mean, it's just like, come on. We've got to stop having all this fuzziness about everybody needs to be happy. That's not the world. You know, the world is not that nice, right? And we've got to stop the 2% arguing the 98%, right? And that's no pun intended on the US election either. But what we got to do is just make sure that we're creating an empowering culture, a culture where when you share your ideas, your head's not knocked off. You know, like, so Amy Edmondson and the Fearless organization, I laugh because, you know, every organization I've ever worked for, and I've worked for some good ones and some bad ones, everybody's got the culture and values, and they're all rubbish, because there is no way you would sit in a meeting with some of the senior people and actually say what you thought. And I think that's what we've got to encourage our children to do, is speak your mind, have some conviction, be adaptive, and go after what the passion is. Stop doing boring jobs that you don't want to do, because that's half the problem with the workforce. No wonder the workforce doesn't care. It's because they don't want to do what they're doing. So stop making them do it.
Yeah, and that's where I think I have a little bit of an optimistic perspective, because I think the school system and the education system and work are so closely tied together. The work systems were asking for homogeneous kind of workforce to come into play at work. That's why our school systems were built in a way where there's a cookie cutter approach. Everybody has to meet the same expectations. And it was just pumping out like a factory setup workforce for a certain type of work environment. But if our work environment is changing, I'm very hopeful that in the long run, it's going to impact how our education systems are built today. And
they're not going to be around, Sveta. They know that. The universities know, because people like us are saying, hey, it sucks. And employees don't want to be paying certain things. So what's going to happen, and what is happening, is that universities can only make their money off international students. So basically, their business model is failing. They know it because it's supply and demand. No one's going to pay to go for a 3-year degree in poking people in the eye with a sharp pencil when no one has a job called poking someone in the eye with a sharp pencil anymore, that you're going to be in a better position because you got this piece of paper. And the piece of paper proved nothing. There are people with amazing qualifications that are the most useless people on this planet.
Yep.
Actually go to right now when we hire and check anybody's degree. Like in IT, we hire every day, and every day it's pragmatic tests, personality tests, attitude tests, rather than which degree you got and which university. I could care a rat's ass if you are from Harvard or from some university in Uganda. I guarantee you, I see some crazy ass smart guys coming from Jamaica and third world countries, and I see some opposite, and vice versa, at the same time. So
you got to hire people for who they are.
Yes,
not what a piece of paper says. And I've always said that if I've got the right person, the right person has to fit in with the right team, because that's the recipe, that's the ingredients of success in the future. There is no future for middle management. Sorry, if you've got manager in your title, you better start being a bit smarter, because we won't need you, because that's Taylorism again. Someone needs to sit there and manage. Manage what? Right? What we need is self-forming, self-organizing teams, and the teams in the core of a future organization will work very much. And I've thought about this a lot over the years. The best way to explain it is it's the Hollywood model. You bring a team together for an opportunity, a problem, a challenge, whatever it is, but a team comes together, focuses on something, and then dismantles like a movie. You get all the best people, create the movie, and then they go off to another thing. So an organization of the future has some core capabilities which allows it to be very agile and flexible, and not agile in the bleeding silver bullet that everybody thinks having a scrum is going to solve the world. That isn't. What we got to do is have people that are smart, that can work in a collaborative environment to get things done. And not all of this management factory that we've spent 130 years creating to only say that there was one way of doing something. We have to manage projects this way. And now that same person has come around and said, right, everybody needs to be agile, which doesn't make sense. Not everything is going to be developed in an agile way. And everybody's been saying that for years. And remember, the people that wrote the goddamn manifesto said the most important thing that everybody forgets. It was about your mindset. That is the one thing that has to change for change. Everything else is sort of not even important until you've changed your mind. Think differently, act differently, something will change. Doing it the other way around doesn't work. Here's a new tool. Oh, what does that do for me?
The next part of the conversation, just to kind of round it off. Rodney, another thing I like that you said that, one of the only jobs that have benefited out of this whole thing is, creative people. The funny part is, in the last 15 years in this digital revolution, one thing we learned is the one thing that IT people have learned is that everything that we do is for our user experience and customer experience. And guess what? IT organizations, the one thing they always lacked was a group which knew how to do user experience and customer experience. The same thing in schools. We are doing everything to get them degrees, but we don't give a shit about the actual end user, which is the kid who wants to be what? User experience, customer experience have been missing. So people have been kind of always been absent. And now the new IT organizations, the new product, and new HR companies that are coming, whatever you want to call them, I hate buzzwords. But whatever organizations are forming in the new world, they have this convergence of responsibilities. As you said, there's no management. There's convergence of cross-functional responsibilities and groups. And today's product managers are also project managers, but they have skills of understanding the business value chain. They understand how does technology apply? How can you apply different platforms and products and basically give business outcomes? So that is one thing that has currently changed. I think that's for the positive. That's my optimistic part, that I see IT is becoming much more converged. We talked about massive skill gaps and organizations. Right now, I'm beginning to see spending heavily, more out of necessity than anything else, and people are learning online a lot, and it's much more relevant.
Look what's happened, Prashant. What's happened is everybody has, largely that I understand, as feedback from the market here in Australia, and I think it's the same globally. A lot of people have just been letting people go, and that's been happening over the last 8 months. Every time an organization does that, there's no real logic outside of the cost. So the experience and the skills that we have lost in 2020 is going to take organizations a very, very long time to recover from. And some of them won't even know what they're recovering from, right? Because, a lot of them have probably seized, because, they're very smart. They've seized the opportunity to break some old workforces up, because, COVID gave them a free swing of the bat to basically get rid of people, break some union agreements and do other things, and effectively get a cheaper workforce. And you see, that's the problem. And that problem is a leadership issue. And I think there's been a crisis in leadership for a long time. And that's because the people that have been leading have one set of tricks that they learned a long time ago, and they're not relevant anymore. And that's why I think you can see, and we've said this before, experience, it used to be in my title, it used to be the reason I used to speak to people, is instead of the inside out, it's the outside in. That's the simplest way to draw a picture to an executive team. And then you can start talking to them about why it's important and what are the ingredients that make that recipe up. But fundamentally, the thing that has to happen from that, and the moment that you've got to get from an executive team, is that recognition that they have to change the way they think about things. And until that happens, nothing else happens.
This is where I believe that the world is now changing. I believe that, one of the parts of the questions we were looking at is, what is the role of IT? You know what? There's no IT. IT and business are converged. Now your product managers actually own the products and the business outcomes, and they are, no matter which function, the marketing, sales, doesn't matter, they're converged, and you are looking at a converged value chain, and you are responsible for the outcome. So not only are you holding yourself accountable, you are responsible for the outcomes as well and the changes. And look at what the descriptions have been. These product managers are essentially used to be business functions, but they're now technology functions. You see, this is already happening right now. As we
well,
see.
I think you got to follow the money, Prashant. So the money, IT was largely set up to fail because of that shared service logic, right? So the argument always used to be, as long as I had the capital, I could control what projects were basically coming through. And then I had to manage my stakeholders, which was my customer. But I had the money. When the money, and for many years, the money's been shifting back into businesses. And you could argue that some of the more successful organizations that truly did things, the business started to develop digital services, banks, postal services, and whatever. And so they started to develop that largely within their businesses, not within IT. So that's how IT kind of became the operational arm, keep the lights on, run things. And because of the cloud technology, the business could easily adopt technology without talking to IT. So we've done all of that to death with the shadow IT and everything else. Technology is another plank of your experience that you need to have to participate in any business in the future. And we've got a workforce that's coming that is the first generation that was born with an iPhone in their hand, and they understand digital. They don't need an idiot like me to put a slide up that says digital transformation. There is no such thing as digital transformation. Stop using the word digital, because when I joined the workforce, I don't remember someone putting a slide up called the analog transformation. And I don't think Taylor did either. So we've just got to say we need to keep adapting rather than keep saying that there's this big bang moment called digital transformation, because all of the data tells us the same thing that it told us back in the 2000s. When we did programs and projects, 80% of them failed. Now we call them digital transformations, and they largely fail as well. And they fail for the same reasons. People don't change. So when the project folds its tent up, when the initiative, when the budget's gone, people just go back to the way they used to do things. That's human beings.
And I think that's where I would like us to also think about the top talent. I understand that companies have laid off their workforce and whatnot, but what they are holding near and dear to them is the top talent. And if the top talent is aware enough and has choices, I think eventually, not in the short term, but in the long term, that top talent behavior is going to drive how organizations shape their work culture or work environment in which that top talent has to operate. So at some point in time, I think the organizations will have to seriously look at taking care of nurturing their talent if they want to retain their top talent, because there's a cost associated with acquiring and retaining top talent as well.
Yeah, but it's there's a transparency issue there that we don't see, right, in organizations, because in some industries and in some areas, we talk about churn. So if you're in a mobile carrier, you are very concerned about churn. And, HR knows the number, and in an IT, and I've worked for 3 of the world's largest IT organizations, we used to talk about what our retention was. But you see, that gets back into the same corporate speak that no one wants to hear bad news, right? We need to have a better view on what we actually mean by talent, because I don't think anybody knows what that means. And I remember many years ago when I used to work in the mining industry, I was really upset with a VP because we were losing a lot of people. And I got very, very stroppy and had an argument with a VP. Probably not a smart thing to do, but I decided to do it. I was a lot younger. And he looked at me dead in the eyes and said, "It's interesting, Rodney, what you think a good person is." And I remember that because I actually, many years later, thought, I have absolutely no idea. So, Sveta, I think you're a great person. Why? Well, because I probably get on with you, you're personable, and, maybe we got some shared interests. But that's what I think of you as a person, as a colleague. What does an organization think? How does an organization think someone's a good person or top talent? And that's an interesting thing, right? What is it? I don't know what it is. All I know is that someone sends that email and, hey, Jane's joining us. She's amazing. She's come from Google and she's got this amazing background and she flies through for 6 months, gets paid a lot of money and leaves. And then does everyone turn around and go, was she really good? What was good?
Yeah, I understand. And I think what we are looking into is the past. But if you look at the future of work and future talent, I think the landscape around talent is shifting. If all black and white jobs are going to be automated and what's left is creative thinking that's required to do a job, you're hiring for that skill set, that person is going to be highly valuable asset in your organization. And if you don't address what's needed and desirable for that employee, then there's a cost associated with finding a substitute when that person leaves. So the environment of the organization eventually will have to pivot to address the needs and desires of their workforce, is just my way of looking at the positive possibility, which is in favor.
No, and I think the organizations do, because I think it just goes back that you're going to have to do something different to be attractive, and attractive is going to have to be something that is thought through. Where at the moment, from the evidence I see, I don't think there's a lot of thinking. The thinking goes, here's a signing on bonus, and this is how much I'm going to pay for you, and here are some benefits. That's attractive. Attractive is not that, because I would say if someone says to me, what are the important things to you, Rodney? Well, for me, where I am, I want to work with really good people. I want to have opportunities that allow me to explore the things that I'm interested in and essentially gives me a platform. Now, if I was starting my career again, I probably think I would think similar things. I want to work for an organization that gives me some brand credibility. It gives me a platform to go and do the next thing I want to do, because I know I'm not going to be here for 65 years. And that's the difference.
And all the things you require that you want, jobs, I think they're polar opposites. In fact, this is something it took me a long time. I never wanted to work for a large organization. It terrifies me. Because first of all, it's like the specialization of labor that economics course you took in 1970, that you stand in the factory floor at the one place and you do the same thing, same day till somebody asks you to do something else. And and so on and so forth. So I personally feel that brand credibility, if I were to start my career then, and even today, Rodney, to be honest, how many percent of people like think like you? Like I'm taking a cynical view.
Well, I've been told not many, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yes,
that's a webinar.
Attitude is everything, and we read about it all. How many people actually live it that way? How many people love their work and they follow their passion?
And that,
I think there's a lot of people that are entrepreneurial, right? They're the kids that put the lemonade stand out when they were 8. But the problem with those stories is there are those amazing people that do that and go create that, make their own path. But I don't see that's the majority. The majority of people tend to follow, not lead. And I think that there is a great deal of value in the opportunities that larger organizations can provide, because not everybody has the drive. Some people want to go and other people have thought about certain things for them. They've taken the hygiene factors. It's hard to work in small businesses. It's easier to work in a large organization, whereas I used to say jokingly, as the chief of poking people in the eye, my job was just to show up. I actually didn't have to worry about a whole bunch of different things because other people were doing it for me, right? And so in a small organization, there isn't that. You've got to be the Swiss Army knife. You've got to be everything. And not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody's good at doing that. And that's a differentiation to how you might construct your future career.
So we are at the top of the hour. I think we should round it off in next 5 minutes. I think we are at the top of the hour. So I want to ask, come back to, let's be more optimistic, and we also have to be a realist. Like we can talk all about this passion and where we want the world to be and what the corporation. But the reality is it's not happening. As you started off, Rodney, saying yes, all these things were fast track, but it is not there. That we are looking into the future of work. We think a lot of these things. Some of these things are already in play. Convergence is happening. This education system, the work cultures, policy, all these things, vast majority of things that we're talking about, which is shaping the future of work. Some of it is already in play, and a lot of things will happen. Some of it will be, done just for show, but a lot of things will be done meaningfully. Some organizations will adopt it and actually lead by example. Other will follow over a period of time. And I always like to give an example, Rodney. One of the things is, if you look, and I with my years serving a lot of large corporate clients, and when I go and I meet a lot of CIOs and IT directors, I always look at their daily job functions. Vast majority, I say 75 to 90% of them, what they were doing? They were maintaining infrastructures. They were actually ordering servers, connecting servers, managing servers, patching servers, asset management, and going to people's PCs and their cubicles and fixing that. And those people grows up and became CIOs. And vast majority of them did not even know what their business value chain was. They were not even qualified enough to sit in a boardroom and understand all the different value chains of business and which value chains are redundant, have gone out of, and what are the new ones that can be created and how you can transform some of those business value chains. And how can you apply technology and constantly and learn or make it actually exciting? Forget for the sake of disruption, forget just for the sake of that, hey, this can be done better. Everybody is trying to fix that. So that is the IT organizations that we have, I think all of us have grown experiencing there. Let's look at the real scenario, real practical scenario. If we had to ask for just 3, 4, 5 things, practical steps that we can ask IT executives to do today, 5 small things that they can do today to make this entire transition smoother, easier, better, practical, more enjoyable for a large organization, but at the same time striking a balance, knowing what realistically businesses are going to be and the executives. What would that be? Just to round off that, and maybe you guys can go and I will ask.
Well, I think the important thing is that, my advice to people, and this has been learned through many years of doing certain things right now, whether it's COVID or not, right? And COVID just makes things a little bit more focused. You have all of the answers that you need in your workforce today. You need to find a way to listen and listen to what is working, listen to what is not working, and listen to what people think they want. Because there's always that difference between want and need. And we've always done a pretty bad job of going, we can do this. And then they say, well, what can you do? Or tell us what you want and blah, blah, blah. We know, and we have access to be able to find out the things that are important to the people that are working in a particular way. Go work out what that is. There will be groups in your organization that are more the innovative groups. They're the ones that will be the early adopters. They don't mind when things might not work perfectly. So seek them out as your experimentations and just start taking small things that are working well, that you can see are great examples of things working well, and just try to amplify what that is, right? In the sense of try to expand how you can use whatever that example is elsewhere across your organization. And if you can do that with enough pieces, you are going to have a massive impact in overall what people do. And just go away from the idea that everybody needs to do the same thing. So just give people different little widgets that they can choose what they do with it when they do with it, right? Rather than I'm going to put this one thing out and every must use it. That Taylorism has to go away.
Shweta, what do you think?
I would say this brings me back to the 2 points that I made earlier, that we have to look at it, which also kind of bubbled up in our conversation, Prashant and Rodney, with you guys, that we have to look at it from 2 perspectives at the same time. We have to look at what employees need and desire. That's where I talked about one of the things that people will want is flexibility. But that definition of flexibility will mean different things to different people. So organizations at the end of the day will need visibility into what their people need and what they desire. And that stitching that ecosystem together, where to your point, Rodney, it's the listening act. We need to uncover what people are thinking about, talking about, what they want, and create an ecosystem where they can thrive and flourish and perform to their best possible performance, so to speak. So visibility and personalizing. Visibility is what the data that people need to make decisions, and flexibility, in my opinion, is the personalization. So I'm trying to anchor what we're talking about in the words that are also like buzzwords these days.
I think the important thing, Sveta, is we've had 8 months largely. For most people, let's say it's a good 6 months. They've had a good 6 months of everyone in the world participating in the world's greatest experiment to prove that you don't need to go to an office.
Yeah.
So you've got the wealth of information at your disposal. And basically, did anything stop? Did anybody die per se? No. The world didn't end because guess what? Rodney didn't come to the office, wasn't wearing a bow tie, and didn't sit in there in the particular way that people thought. And that's the important thing. Look at the crap behind me. And the thing is, now no one cares, right? Where before you would never do that. I wouldn't wear a t-shirt. Well, I would. So there's a whole bunch of different things that have gone away over the last 6 months because the kid coming in, the dog coming in, things being interrupted, the doorbell going, that's life. And work and life have never been separate. We just tried to think of them separate, which goes back to Owen. And work-life balance was a load of rubbish. Work-life integration, and largely what people want is to live first and work around their life, not the other way round, which is what we were taught. Is what we have to do.
I am such a big champion of this philosophy that we should work to live and not live to work. I think it's
absolutely.
Okay, all of us are moving to Europe now. Okay, none of us are.
I wouldn't be moving to Europe right now with 60,000 COVID a day.
I knew it was coming. So okay,
that's not the place to move, buddy. If you're going to move anywhere, come to Australia.
True. You guys are not going to have summer forever, right?
Well, look, it's going to get hot here right now. I mean, it's 30 degrees yesterday, but look, at least
you guys are having fun because
we've gone through 7 months of lockdowns, which has not been a great experience. But there's a lot of things that we have to take out of this, and I've got friends all over the world, and Yesterday, the big news here is we were shutting down one of our states and shutting the border down because they've got 30 cases. 30.
Yeah.
And you're looking at countries that have got 60,000 or 3,000 a day, and we shut our whole country down and still largely is shut, basically where our daily count was in the tens, not tens of thousands, not thousands. So look, we will get past this. It's unfortunate. 2020 will be a watershed moment in history, and we've got plenty of time to look back at it. But, my final thoughts, because I do have to drop, is, look, I know a lot of this sounded very pessimistic and very negative, and that's just human nature. It's easier to look at the negative or the problems than necessarily all the positives. I think there's a very bright future. We just need leadership to lead us to where that brighter future is. I think technology is amazing. It's going to make life, and does make life, so much easier as an enabler. And let's just keep talking about technology to how it supports us doing the things that are important. And let's just be better human beings, because what's going to be important in the future of work is being human. And we need to focus on that creativity, that empathy, and that connection, because that's what makes us human.
I will end this session now with my final thoughts, and I'll say this. I will take the opposite route to empathy and so on and so forth, because you have covered that enough, and that's great. I'll say this. From IT folks who are going to work, I think it's also a positive experience. You can see that the world did not end. Yes, there were layoffs, there were negative effects, but I always say, if you want to go to heaven, you got to die. You have to pay a price, and the world needed to be shaken a bit, to be honest. And that's not such a bad thing. Your body gets sick, it cleanses itself, not such a bad thing if you learn from it. I always say, as long as you learn from it, and it resets the direction in the right way. So for me, I think it's a positive experience. I think the world will learn from it. Will it get idealistic? We were never idealistic, right? So we'll get there. For IT organizations, I'll just say something very pragmatic steps. And I'll say, from our perspective, from the IT managers, directors who are trying to figure out how in this new world try to become a product company or something they were never asked to do for 20 years, 15 years, and they're struggling with this transformation change and this service economy and so on. What can they do? They're asking. So my suggestions are completely different and more pragmatic. I will say, create converged groups, become more tied to the business, become passionate about business, learn about business. And if you're not about it, then go and join a business which you're passionate about, and you understand that business value chain. Take several extremely simplistic steps towards building your career and goal and your daily job. And if I was an IT executive, technology, I would build a team of digital bandits. I will make sure that I am, first of all, educated enough as a leader to qualify myself as a digital or business strategist and understand that, and understand competition, understand disruption, understand short-term, long-term goals. I'm passionate about it. I believe in it. And then I hire a bunch of growth hackers. I know I'm using a classic term, but what are these guys? These are simple guys who find technology interesting. They live, breathe, and eat it, and they want to apply that in real-world scenarios, solutions to services, and they're means to an end. Understand and become, mini entrepreneurs, and then hire digital architects. These are people who build platforms and foundations that support long-term goals and supporting and evolving digital ecosystems, not just applications or one mobile application or web application. They do not focus on one application or use case. They see a sustainable, flexible, scalable ecosystem that is architected and designed and based on given parameters and constraints. And these constraints are mostly business and technology driven, design related to budgets, organizational roadmaps, priorities, technology stacks, frameworks, and so on and so forth. And this is based on understanding of business value chain. As I said, what you buy, what you customize, build. And last but not the least, I will remove my emphasis from traditional brick and mortar of maintaining data centers and coming to offices and ordering infrastructure. Many of these things can be just adapted in cloud and allows people flexibility to work from home anywhere and as a platform and a service. And then you need to let some of these things go and see what you can do to add value to the organization. So a lot of things that can be outsourced, packaged, so on and so forth. And what you need to do is something that you believe in, passionate and adding value. So operate from the place of individual intellectual freedom rather than a place of insecurity that this is what I have learned, this is what my job function was, and if I did not do this, I will lose my job, I will lose my paycheck. And that's also an onus on the executives and leadership to bring about that change. But I believe that kind of convergence would lead to some pragmatic steps in helping organizations reform.
So appreciate something there. I just have to drop off. So look, I really appreciate the opportunity, and everyone stay safe and well. And obviously, as I said, one thing you can do from meetings like this, if you're still listening, just go back to your organization, pick something and do it, and learn from it, and then do it again. So just keep experimenting and keep trying, and things will change. But thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And I hope you learned something from our chat.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, Shweta. Again, hopefully we join for another one. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.